terms of our farm income in Southwest Georgia, we did see a decline in 2014. We saw some acreage shifts simply because of the prices of the crops. We planted a lot more peanuts last year than we did in previous years, and I think again, price driven, we're going to see some more of that shift in 2015. The one thing that remained a very, very bright spot was animal agriculture, particularly cattle. We saw record highs at the end of 2014 for those producers, and those have really carried over even into 2015. So overall, it was a down year for agriculture, but we also have to keep in mind that was relative to the record highs that we saw from 2011 through 2013. So as far as 2015, well, when all else fails, plant peanuts. Right now, that seems to be the most attractive thing for producers to plant. Last year, we planted about 600,000 acres of peanuts. Given the price of alternatives, namely corn and cotton and soybeans to some extent, I think farmers are going to plant upwards of 700,000 acres, and a lot of that's going to be dependent on seed availability. But it is by far the most attractive crop right now, given, again, what we grow in Southwest Georgia. So I certainly think we're going to see an increase in those acres. Most of those are going to come from a further reduction in corn. We mentioned some of the headwinds that our prices are facing with the rising dollar, and we've also got an awful lot of carryover, particularly in the corn and cotton markets, and it's sort of keeping downward pressure on those prices. And so peanuts are really attractive. Cotton, I think, is probably going to stay about where it was in terms of acreage. We're forecasting somewhere between 65 and 70 cents a pound, and at least at the market, not factoring in some of the crop insurance programs that are in the new farm bill, that's pretty close to a net loser per acre at that price for cotton. But I do think it will remain more or less in line with what we saw last year. Again, I sort of mentioned it, animal agriculture still is remarkably strong. The cattle market set some additional highs in the month of January. I'm not sure if we've seen the peak or not. There are some data coming out of USDA that for the first time in 8 years, there's actually more cows in the U.S., but we've increased numbers rather than decreased herd numbers. So there's a school of thought that is actually going to start trending down a little bit. But again, relative certainly to 10 and 15 years ago, our cattle producers are in really good shape. The price of corn down like it is helping on the margins with feed and things like that. So I really do think the animal agriculture side, particularly cows, is going to remain really good for the next number of years. In terms of margins are being squeezed. The cost of inputs are always a concern. I think I may have mentioned last year that inputs never fall as fast as prices do, and that's what we saw at the end of 2014. The prices dropped precipitously across all three of those major commodities, but we haven't seen a similar retreat in input costs. Obviously, and Vieta mentioned the drop in oil prices. That certainly helps. We need a lot of oil and fuel to run farming operations. We haven't seen that translate into the cost of fertilizer, however. And so those major inputs, seed, fertilizer, are still up there with 2013 levels. And so that margin is getting squeezed even more. In general, we're going to see farm income drop significantly, I think even from 2014. The opportunities that farmers took advantage of in late 13 when the prices were still somewhat high for their 2014 crop are just frankly not there. I do think that, again, peanuts is going to be the crop of choice for farmers that can get the seed. With the 2014 Farm Bill, peanuts, again, are very, very attractive because of the price loss coverage and some of the average revenue coverage that the farmers can take advantage of related specifically to peanuts. And so it does help build that margin. I think we will obviously see an increase in the amount of the government payment that makes up total farm income in 2014. So I say all of that, and then I do just want to reiterate the farm economy has helped bolster our Southwest Georgia economy in some of those years, particularly right after the Great Recession, as it's been referred to. Those years were very, very good for ag, and it was particularly good for Southwest Georgia, and it helped us sort of weather that storm better than some of the other rural areas in the state. There was a lot of tractors purchased. There was a lot of new land purchased, new land cleaned up and put under irrigation in certain parts of the state. And I think that's going to help us maybe weather the next year or two with these decreased prices. Irrigated land still commands a premium in terms of land values, which is really helping prop up the real estate market, particularly when you compare that with timberland and recreational land. There's still a really good premium for our irrigated farmland. So what are we keeping our eye on other than our prices? Well, obviously, you know I'm a water guy, and there's no way you can decouple the forecast for water with the forecast for agriculture in Southwest Georgia. Our farm gate values would not be in the $500, $600, $700 million range for our area without access to fresh water. And so I do want to just remind you of a couple of things that farmers are keeping their eye on. First of all, and I did mention this last year, but there have been some developments. The EPA rule on navigable waters, should that rule be put into effect, it would certainly increase the regulatory burden for a lot of producers in terms of what is now considered navigable waters and under the auspices of EPA and the Corps of Engineers. I do know that there was a joint House and Senate committee yesterday, perhaps, or Tuesday, and there's been a resolution introduced in the House of Representatives that would prevent EPA from finalizing that rule. So a lot of people paying attention to that. We're still under a moratorium in Southwest Georgia for new irrigation wells in the Upper Ford Aquifer. That is essentially capped the expansion in irrigated acres in Southwest Georgia. There are some farmers that have drilled down to deeper aquifers to try to expand the irrigated land, particularly trying to take advantage of those higher prices. I expect a lot of that's going to slow down given the prices that we're seeing now. But we are still under a moratorium as far as drilling new wells. The Flint River Drought Protection Act was adopted during the last legislative session. We have new rules in place for that. All the farmers with center pivots will be required to meet some efficiency standards, 80% efficiency by 2020. And so that's something that our ag producers are keeping an eye on. And finally, the Supreme Court. When I stood up here last year, I let you know that the state of Florida had filed a suit, an original action for asking the Supreme Court to equitably apportion all the waters in the ACF basin. And at the time, we didn't know whether the court was going to take the case or not. There was a lot of school of thought that it's not the right time, and that was really Georgia's argument. But we found out on October the 1st of last year that, in fact, the court is going to take the case, and they did take the case. And right on the heels of that, they appointed a special master, Ralph Lancaster out of Maine, to hear the case. And Mr. Lancaster is on a really, really fast schedule. These equitable apportionment cases often take 6 to 10 years to adjudicate, and this one they're thinking may be done in 2. So the process is moving extremely fast for something that could have a fairly significant impact on how much water is used in the state of Georgia and in the Flint River Basin. The complaint from Florida requests that the court set Georgia's water use at 1992 levels. That would equate to about 500,000 acres of irrigated land coming out of production in the Flint. So it's kind of a big deal. So nothing exactly in the near term for ag to do except keep an eye on it and know that the process is moving rapidly. So finally, on the Farm Bill, this is going to be the first major test drive of the Farm Bill from the beginning of a crop year to the end. There's still a lot of uncertainty about what all is in it and exactly how it's going to impact producers. I know there's been an awful lot of meetings with bankers and attorneys and all that sort of thing to try to figure out exactly how to best manage under this new Farm Bill. However, it's legislation that is now going to govern what we do in Southwest Georgia. And so I think it just sort of adds to that uncertainty that farmers are really in a wait-and-see type type posture. So with all of that said, certainly the news from my end on the ag side is not as good as it has been in recent years. But the fact still remains that Southwest Georgia is one of the best places on the planet to grow food, fiber, fuel, and shelter. And so I think Albany and our surrounding area can continue to capitalize on that. There was an article in USA Today, maybe Monday or perhaps last week, that mentioned had the top 5 highest paying professions in the U.S. right now. Number 5 was agriculture and natural resources. And so Albany and Southwest Georgia have an abundance of both. And so, as we think about ways to improve the quality of life, certainly I think agriculture is a major player in that. And I think we've got a lot of good opportunities. So with that, I'm going to conclude. I always say this at the end, but I want to reserve the right to get smarter later. I appreciate the invitation again and look forward to questions.